everybody, I'm Matt Valley, and welcome to today's episode of the Rock and Roll Research Podcast, where we share the super cool backstories and side gigs of the research and insights pros that you trust. I'm really pleased today to welcome Jon Giegengack to the podcast. Now, Jon is the founder and principal of Hub Entertainment Research, where they really are the foremost experts when it comes to all things entertainment, from TV to movies, to gaming, sports, sponsorships, and consumer technology, all sorts of good stuff. Now, that's a whole lot to keep up with, but Jon somehow finds time to front a totally legit country rock band called Whiskey Horse. And speaking from experience, I've seen some of the video, man, people have a good time when they go see Whiskey Horse because they're really good. So super cool. We'll talk about all that and more on today's podcast. Welcome to the show, Jon.
Hey, Matt, thanks for having me.
Yeah, totally. Really happy to have you. So let's start with research, right? So you founded Hub something like, I guess, close to 10 years ago now.
It'll be 10 years next year. So that's pretty crazy to think about.
Yeah, that's really impressive. That's an awfully good run. But let's go all the way back. Now, how'd you get into research in the first place, and then how did you find yourself founding Hub?
Well, way back, probably like in the late 90s, I was doing sales for a software company, and there was a friend of mine that was working for a research company, and she told me about her job and the kinds of things that she did, and basically worked for all kinds of interesting clients, companies I'd heard of, and her job was to kind of figure out the answers to the tough questions that they had, and that sounded like an incredibly cool job. So I applied for a job at her company. Ended up working there as a project manager for a long time. Then I went to work for a company called CMB in Boston, really good research company.
Chadwick Martin Bailey.
Yep. Yeah.
Cool.
So I worked there for about 10 years, and there had primarily a sales role, so going out and getting new clients for the company. But I really liked the research end of things, and had some experience with that. So whenever we got a cool project, I would kind of try to insert myself on the project team and have a role in working on the project too.
Right.
And doing business development, I could kind of go out and target the kinds of companies I was interested in. So I really like TV and movies, play a ton of video games, obviously participate in music, like we'll talk about. And so I would go out and target those kinds of companies. And maybe around 2012, we had done kind of a self-funded research study on, what we called the golden age of television. So it was a little while after Netflix had started streaming, but they still had pretty much that whole market to themselves. And we called the study the golden age of TV, not realizing that every research study for the next 6 or 7 years was going to be called that. But it was just the amount of interest we got from media companies and different kinds of entertainment companies really just kind of blew me away. It was far bigger than anything else that we had done at the time. And it seemed to me that the time was perfect for starting a company just focused on technology and entertainment. Just limiting it to TV, there are these giant billion-dollar companies, multi-billion-dollar companies, obviously, that every consumer participates in, and had somehow, avoided technological disruptions for about 50 years. But now we're going to have to go through all of that change in a really compressed period of time. Right. And it just seemed like there was a lot of questions that all these companies had in common, and that would be pretty easy to address with research, and that there wasn't a lot of information out there already. So that was kind of the genesis of starting the company. And most of our work is in TV and movies, but we also do some stuff in gaming. We do quite a bit in music. We're getting into podcasting and things like that too. So basically everything now, all kinds of entertainment that all come through that broadband pipe into your house or into the little mini computer that everybody has in their pocket. They're all kind of competing for people's disposable time now. So it turned out to be a really good time to make that move. And it's been an eventful, almost 10 years now. But that's the reason that I did it. And that's what we focus on.
Now, was it scary for you to go from working for a company to putting up your own shingle and starting from zero?
Hell yes. Yes, it was. I had I mean, the first couple of studies we did, I just kind of paid for them myself out of my pocket and gave them away for free to clients, to try to get, interest in the company, interest in the work. And probably the first year, I probably took about a 90% pay cut.
Yeah.
But once you start, you kind of can't, you can't stop. You just have to go. It's kind of like, remember in the Roadrunner where Wile E. Coyote would kind of nail the boards together,
Yeah.
and they would sort of just levitate, and then he would only fall when he looked down, the whole thing would fall apart. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what starting a business reminded me of, is just not looking down and just continuing to move forward no matter what. And then, eventually, I think in many cases, if you do that, eventually it'll work out. But it certainly was. It was pretty scary. I've got 3 kids. I had one of them was getting ready to start college, and I remember sitting
wow.
in the meeting that you go to when they're juniors, and they the guidance counselor is up in the front of the room. They tell you how much college is going to cost, and I remember just sitting there thinking,
Yeah.
not sure how this is going to work out, but yeah, but they gave me a goal to shoot for and everything. It all worked out fine. I think most of the time, if you just keep your head down and work hard and don't think about failing, I think most people can make this kind of thing work.
Yeah. Wow. That's quite a time to make a shift like that. It's got to take some real conviction and belief that you're doing something meaningful that fills a gap in the market.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, so I started the company when I was like 40. And I think if I tried to do it before then, it would have been a lot harder. Like I would have had more energy, maybe, well, not more energy, but I would have had I wouldn't have had kids, for instance.
Right.
But I also wouldn't have had like the perspective and the connections and the people that I brought on as partners or people that work here. Like they're all people that I knew personally in one way or another.
Sure.
So I wouldn't have had that network to draw on. So I think it would have been a lot more difficult. And I think, one way I've seen people screw up is just starting a business because they want to start a business. And that's the reason for doing it. And I think the key is what you said. You have to know some problem that you can fix or something that you can do in a different way or in a better way than what everybody else is already doing.
Right.
And that's the most important ingredient, I think, at least in my experience.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So let's talk music, because I mean, somewhere along the line you got really good. So when did you start playing? And let's hear about your journey there.
Yeah, well, I actually didn't. I played piano when I was a kid. I didn't play guitar. I don't think I picked up a guitar till I was about 30.
Oh,
and,
wow.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm not that great of a guitar player. If you watch those videos, you'll notice you can barely hear me playing at all. Everybody else has got like 2 amps and electric guitars. So there's probably a reason to that.
You got the Marshall cabinet that's empty, no speaker inside.
I just plug mine right into the board. I don't even get an amp. But yeah, but I picked it up. In fact, the guy that is the lead guitar player in my band now has been a friend of mine for about 25 years. And so he gave me, 4 guitar lessons 20 years ago when I first started playing.
Yeah.
And after that, he ended up moving away to Chicago. So we didn't see each other for a long time. But I really, I think the key is like, even when I sucked, when I was terrible and I first started, I just really, really liked to do it. And like, I literally, like the Bryan Adams song, I literally played it at first till my fingers bled a little bit, not a whole lot, but some. And yeah, and then from there, I just kind of learned from watching YouTube. In fact, I don't know how people learned anything before YouTube. You can find out anything on there. Yeah. But so I guess I'm kind of self-taught in that regard. So my son, I signed him up for guitar lessons, and after about 2 weeks, he knew a whole bunch of stuff that I had no idea about, really basic stuff.
Getting schooled by your son, huh?
Oh yeah, all the musical theory and the reminded me where the different notes are in the next. Since I just learned that by watching people do it on YouTube and kind of emulating it. Yeah. So that's how I started to play. And then my friend Stu, the lead guitar player, had moved back, and he called me up because he said we need they had a band. I guess they had, I think they had parted ways with the singer they had. So he said, we need a singer. And he said, I know you can play guitar too. And he knew that I like country music, among the kinds of music that I like. So he had me down to try out for that. And that was about 5 years ago. So I've been playing with them ever since, and starting to get some, it's probably my absolute favorite thing to do. Yeah. It's a really good band. We were talking earlier, like besides my friend Stu, who's been playing for about 40 years and just getting better all the time. Two of the other guys went to Berkeley, back in the 80s. So they're kind of they have other careers, but they're kind of career musicians and just really, really, really good.
Yeah.
So it's been incredible for me just to play with those guys and just the amount that you can sort of absorb through osmosis, just watching them do what they do.
Yeah.
And it's really, really fun. It's my favorite thing to do. And it's kind of like the perfect, but which side of your brain is the artistic side? Is it the right brain or the left brain? I can't remember. But whichever side of my brain my job uses, like this uses the exact opposite part of it.
Right.
So it's a good balance.
Yeah. I've been fortunate the same way in the bands that I've played in. I've always managed to find players who are far better than me. I've always been the weak link, but that's a good place.
That's how I feel too, kind of like imposter syndrome.
That's right.
Yeah, but I watched some of the videos of your band. That was you guys were tearing it up.
Oh, thanks, man. Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Punk is underrated. There's even we do like some Shooter Jennings songs. He's sort of like a punk / country cross, I think. Some of the best songs were the Drive By Truckers that used to be a punk band before they were a country band.
Yeah, it makes for a really good crossover. Like you've got even like Social Distortion, which borrows a lot from blues and
we do a cover of the of Social Distortion's cover of Maybelline.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's really good. It's one of my favorite ones.
I love it. It. Awesome. Okay, so you've been kind of following these parallel paths. You started a business and then you started a band, right? And like you said, they borrow from different parts of your brain. But is there anything that you've maybe learned from one side that you've been able to apply to the other?
Yeah, I think there's a ton. Well, just in like songwriting, which I've taken some classes in that, reminds me a lot of my other job, because you're trying to take, nobody really wants to listen to a song where it's very like explicit and everything is on the nose and explained. The best writers, like the Bob Dylans of the world, there's just a lot of metaphor. There's a lot of where you pick out the most important things to say and say them in kind of a very succinct way. And then the other person's brain kind of connects the pieces together and figures out what the story is. And I think a good piece of research is like that too, where, all of our studies, just like everybody else does, we come out with like a 100 and something page deck that has all the data and all the findings. But the most important part is where at the beginning, where we kind of boil it down into 6 or 7 or 8, pieces of data that form a narrative and let people come away with something that you can mentally remember, that you can mentally process. Whereas if you just dumped all this information on them, that's really maybe even less helpful than having no information at all. So that process of kind of winnowing down all of this stuff into the most important pieces that tell a story, those two things I think are really similar.
Yeah, I really like that analogy. And as you were talking, I was kind of thinking through my head, like the 100-page deck is sort of like free form jazz, right? It's like it's all the data, doesn't have any
sound check.
Yeah, there's nothing to really grab onto, but you need the hooks, you need that chorus, you need that catchy bit that's like, okay, this is what I take away from the song. This is what's coursing through my head. After I heard this presentation, I remember these things, and that's what I'm going to take. So yeah, I like that. That's cool. All right. So you're working in the entertainment space when it comes to research. And if I think about, having worked in a lot of different industries and research, for me, entertainment is really probably the most complex right now, especially over the last, 10 or 15 years. So very curious to know, as you think about the future of research in this space, what's emerging or what will become important.
I think one of it is really complicated, like especially in the TV space,
right?
And that's because you have this industry that was created back in the 50s, and for most of the time that TV has been around, the people that were watching weren't the customers; they were the products. So they were the ones getting bought and sold by the networks to advertisers, and they didn't have to worry too much about keeping them happy because there was only 3 or 4 networks to choose from. Mm-hmm. And then they even had a term back then called LOP, which is least objectionable programming, which the strategy was that to win viewers, all you had to do was have the least crappy show on TV at any time slot, because people, and they were right. It was a good strategy. But you don't have to come up with and spend millions and millions of dollars on the Terminal List or Breaking Bad or whatever, because you can just have, police chases or home videos on, and if that's the least crappy thing that's on, people will gravitate over to it.
Yeah.
And now, of course, with this broadband pipe into everybody's house and everybody's pocket, the end users are the customer, because they have tons of options and they can vote with their feet by going somewhere else. So the industry has had to adapt to people's preferences, which it didn't really have to do before. And there's also all these complexities, kind of inside baseball stuff, like with rights management and, why can I stream this show, but I can't stream that one? And why are these episodes on this platform, but the back seasons are on this other one? Right. All these things that are ingrained in the TV industry, but that make no sense at all to consumers.
Right. Yeah.
So, and that complexity is a problem, especially when, maybe you're competing with a company like Netflix that's generating, tons and tons of its own content and doesn't have to worry about that as much as some of the other platforms do, or where you're competing with video games that just suck up bigger and bigger and bigger amounts of time.
Right.
So all of that complexity is really hard for people to understand, and it's a challenge for the industry. And I think it builds into one of the really important things that's happening. I think this is true of research in general, but especially in the media industry, is that there's more sort of data lying around than ever for you to pick up and use. So all of the behavioral data from Nielsen, from ComScore, a bunch of other newer companies like iSpot. Antenna is a really cool company that tracks people's subscriptions through their credit card records.
Oh,
which ones people are adding or dropping. And I think the temptation is high to just rely entirely upon all that behavioral data. But you still have to balance it with other data about why people are doing what they're doing, or how they're behaving when you can't see them. There could be two people in your data set that behaviorally look exactly the same. But unless you get an idea of what else they're doing when you can't track them, you won't know that maybe they're actually two really different people. Maybe one of them's a lot more of a valuable customer than the other. Maybe one of them is a lot more accessible or has some particular distinctive thing about what they like to watch that you could use to pull them in, and the other one doesn't. So I think one of the challenges for researchers is not relying 100% on either one of those, behavioral data or regular primary market research alone, but figuring out how do you kind of combine them into one thing that tells the most complete story.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I know, I just recall like the promise of big data was, wow, there's a world with no questions because the data are already there, right? But so often it's the primary secondary issue where I have a very specific question that I want to answer.
Yeah.
These existing data will kind of give me an idea, but it doesn't answer the question that I have. And then that's where primary research often comes in. But like you say, it's the combination of the two that can work together. So 1 + 1 = 3 kind of thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think if you have so much data, sometimes it can be misleading, which is worse than not having any data at all. If you kind of assume that the answer's in here and you don't look any further, and you don't sort of think outside the box a little bit, it can be easy to miss stuff. And I think behavioral data, at least for it's the best kind of data for a lot of things that are really important, like how much time people are spending or how much money they're spending. You can ask people questions about that, but they're notoriously bad at estimating that stuff.
Right.
But you can't tell from behavioral data, why they're doing this, or is this thing they're doing, is that really what they want to do, or is there something else they'd rather do if it was an option? And all of those things are the kind of stuff that can change behavior and can move people in one direction or another. And so I think it's really, really important not to miss that stuff. And that's what our whole company's built around, providing that data that explains the behavioral information that our clients are getting already from lots and lots of good companies. But what can we find out that will illuminate what that behavior means, or how they can influence it?
Yeah, cool. Love it. All right. So you so you're charged with measuring and making sense of all these media, right? So when you're looking to media for insight or information or even enjoyment, what kinds of sources do you turn to?
Well, for enjoyment, I play a ton of video games. In fact, I haven't played as much lately because my PlayStation died, hard drive failure.
Ouch.
But I have an Xbox too, but it wasn't hooked up. But I was sort of relieved at how much time I wasn't spending playing that. So I just kind of let it go for a while. But then I realized I have about $1,000 worth of games stored in the cloud or on my hard drive. So eventually I had to get a replacement. So, but I do play a lot of video games. And I watch a lot of TV and movies just to stay up on stuff. But I'm trying to think of the stuff I'm watching right now. Well, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Taylor Sheridan, pretty much everything that he's written or done. So he did Sicario, he did Hell or High Water. He was actually an actor before that, and he was a cowboy. So he's in the Texas Cowboy Hall of Fame.
Oh,
and,
crazy.
And of course now he's written Yellowstone in 1883 and a couple of other shows that are on Paramount Plus. But I've been watching and rewatching tons and tons of his. I don't know if you've seen Yellowstone, but you're in Texas. Oh, you got to watch it too. I've seen it. Like, I'm on my third time through. But that's the kind of stuff I like to watch the most. And I'm a big fan of the West in general. So those shows are really great.
Yeah. You know what I noticed, like with gaming in particular, if you're not a gamer, it's really hard to do insights in the gaming space because it's a whole culture, right? It's hard to wrap your head around.
Well, yeah. And plus, if you're trying to do research and it's kind of the same in the TV industry, where if you're doing research that's going to be used by creative people, so people that are actually making the shows and game designers even more so, they're artists, so they kind of look with suspicion on the idea that some kind of numbers or some kind of survey can tell me how to do my art better. And if you don't have an appreciation for the art form, so if you don't like shows, if you don't like movies, if you don't play a lot of games, it's really hard to talk to them in a way that they'll take seriously. And you got to get the idea across to them that this research isn't trying to tell you what to do. It's trying to help you take your art and make it as commercially successful as possible when you're finished, which is something that everybody wants, and everybody can kind of get behind that strategy. Yeah,
cool. Great point. All right, John, here's a question that I really want to know. Okay, so I'm very curious about this. You're playing country music, right? But you've already alluded to the fact that may not be the only genre of interest for you. But I got to ask this. So you're stranded on a desert island, right? You've got 3 records of your choosing to keep you company for the rest of your days. What are they?
I think I'd have U2, Joshua Tree.
Yeah, classic.
And I grew up in Philadelphia, so I'm actually like a huge hip hop fan as well as country music, if you can believe that. So probably one of the Public Enemy CDs, maybe like Fear of a Black Planet. That's one of my favorites.
Yes,
and
such a great record.
Yeah, it's so good. And then probably I'm listening to a ton of Whiskey Myers right now. I don't know if you've heard them.
I haven't.
They're phenomenal. They're kind of like maybe like the Leonard Skinner kind of reincarnated with some kind of hard rock thrown in there too. But they're great. Right. So any one of their albums, like I listen to them on Spotify, so I'm not even sure which albums I'm listening to right now, but pretty much anything by them is great.
Cool. Yeah, I love that. I'll check it out. That's been one of the real benefits of doing this podcast, is discovering all this new music.
Yeah.
So, really cool. I appreciate it. Excellent. Well, John, great chat. Really glad that we've had a chance to meet.
That was my pleasure. This is the most fun podcast I've done, I think.
I'm glad to hear that. So super cool. And I love your insights about entertainment. I mean, for me, that's kind of a black box space where leave it to the experts kind of thing. So really cool. So let's definitely stay in touch. When I'm in your part of the country, got to see your band. So
that'd be great.
Let's do it.
I'll let you know.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Matt.